What's up guys, this is Chris here, and today we're going to be doing kind of a holiday video. Today we're going to be doing a follow-up to a video I did a week ago or so where we were talking about if I could only have 5 guns. And I mentioned in that video that there was a lot of sentimental guns I got from my dad, guns I got from my grandpa, that I might have put in that list, but it wasn't going to be helpful for that list. So you guys asked to see those, so I thought today might just be a fun show and tell day for Christmas here, and I could just kind of give you some information and some background maybe on me and maybe on my dad and my grandfather, and then talk about some of the guns that they used in their everyday lives. Kind of give you more of a background into maybe what an Iowa farm kid and a couple Iowa farmers do with firearms every day. So with that being said, we'll just get right into it, and I'll just talk about my grandpa first. So my grandfather was a farmer in Iowa for most of his life, and he was an immigrant from Germany. So was my grandma. And they built themselves up from nothing, and eventually he owned a couple 100 acres of farmland by the time he passed. And he did that through hard work, and he did that through determination. But in that daily life of owning that dairy farm and having some corn and a bunch of different stuff, he used a lot of firearms. And the first one I want to talk about was the one I used to hear all the tales about when I was a kid. So my grandfather was a good marksman, and that kind of runs in my family, believe it or not. But my grandfather used to do tricks with his 22 revolver. So I did want to mention his 22 revolver. He used to be able to light matches with this, from what I hear, and he used to be able to put out candles. I did see him do that one time. But the main thing he used to do was he used to shoot rabbits on his tractor. He used to ride on his tractor in the bean field and in the cornfield, and he would keep this on a holster strapped to the tractor, and he would pull this out and he could shoot rabbits on the move with this. This is an 8-shot double single action 22 revolver from Iver Johnson. It's actually the Iver Johnson Target Model 57. Now this was the first pistol I ever shot, and this kicked off my infatuation with pistols for the rest of my life. Now one of the reasons why that is because my family wasn't huge on handguns. You're going to see most of these are rifles and shotguns because those are practical guns where I'm from. Where I'm from, you don't need concealed carry that much, but you do need a shotgun every day. You do need a rifle every day, so you're going to be seeing a lot of that. But this gun I was absolutely enamored with when I was younger because it was the first pistol I ever had with sights. My dad had an old 1911, but it just had GI nub sights. You couldn't hit anything with it. And a 45 caliber semi-auto when you're like 8 years old is not that much fun. Not compared to a single action 22 revolver, of which you can shoot all day. And me at 8 and 10 and 12 doing odd jobs to afford the occasional box of 22. And where I'm from, even when I was 12 years old, I could go right to the store and I could buy 22 ammunition. So that's what we did. I hoed beans and I did trees in the summer, and I did construction work for companies that my brother worked for, because rural Iowa doesn't really have a lot of labor requirements as far as age goes. And I would buy rounds and I would practice, and I would shoot at a shooting range about either right outside of my the city limits, or my dad would drive us to the actual shooting range, which is about 7 miles away, and he'd cut us loose for a few hours, and this is where I learned to shoot with a lot of these firearms. This 22 revolver means a lot to me because it's been in my family at least half a century, if not more. We've had this a long time, barely ever been clean. One of the things I always remember when I was a kid is we used to get tons of blowback off the cylinder. Every time the cylinder would fire, it sprays backward a little bit, and every once in a while your fingers get stung. And my friends were so afraid to shoot this, but it was the only 22 I had, so we shot the hell out of it. And I still do shoot it every once in a while, just not lately. Most of these guns I don't put rounds through anymore just because, you know, sentimental things, I just like to look at them. Now, the first rifle I ever shot, you guys have definitely seen before. It's going to be one of the only ones we have shooting footage of, and I got that from my dad. My dad gave it to me for a practical reason. He told me to keep rabbits out of the garden. That was my job. So I would shoot them with the pellet gun and they'd just run away. So I was like, Dad, I need something bigger. So he got me this. This is a Remington lever action Golden Boy. Now this, one of the first years I believe this came out, and it was one of the new guns he bought. He wasn't big on new guns, he liked used guns, so do I. Because if it's a good gun, it still works used, and it's a third of the price, so why not, right? But he was a cowboy, and my dad loved cowboy action guns. He loved the whole cowboy lifestyle. And this was the first gun he got me. It's got buckhorn sights. It is a lever action 22 long rifle. You feed it up here in the feeding tube. There's no side loading port. You pull out the feeding tube like that, and you drop rounds into the tube, slam it down, rack it, and go. And I used to always remember we'd buy the cheapest 22 ammunition for this thing, and it would always malfunction. And it would always get rounds stuck up in the port there, and you have to take a pocket knife or a screwdriver or something and pull them out. Because we didn't know any other way, and with the lever action, you know, it's kind of an enclosed system. You can't just pop the receiver open like an AR. You can't strip the mag. There's nothing to strip. You just gotta pry it out slowly over time, and we got awful good at that. We used to use this for rabbit hunting, and we used to use this for squirrel hunting. And my dad, he was so poor when he grew up. He grew up on the south side of Cedar Rapids. He used to live in a boxcar that his dad repurposed as a house, and they just did whatever they could to survive, and they kind of subsistence lived. They hunted, and I remember my dad, they used to fish in what I believe is the Cedar River, and he used to just talk about living on kind of $1 a day type of stuff. But you have to remember, my dad was born in 1940. That was a long time ago, and they lived a different life back then, and that's kind of the life I was raised in. I was raised by an old man in rural Iowa, so I kind of grew up the old way. And if you grow up the old way, you need a 22. A 22 is a way of life. The ammunition's cheap, it's very useful. You can shoot even big stuff with this, believe it or not. I've heard of deer being taken with 22, although I've never experienced that myself. But a 22 rifle on a farm is irreplaceable. There's so many things you do with it, not just for hunting, but for pest removal as well, is the main thing. So many rats, so many raccoons, so many things in places that they shouldn't be, and they need to be out of there, and a 22 is the best way to do that. Low recoil, so we never used Deer Pro when we shot 22s when we were kids. Don't do that, because I'm hearing damage from that. But we used to stick Kleenex and all kinds of stuff in our ears and just go out and shoot. But I have a lot of fond memories, and I learned a lot of marksmanship with this 22 lever action. The reason for that is because there's no repeat shots. Once you shoot, you have to run the action, so you're a little more careful about aligning the sights, breath control, and all that stuff. Especially when you're paying for the ammo and you don't have a lot of money, you get pretty good at hitting what you're aiming at. Now, my dad, his dad was a garbage man, a part-time garbage man, and he took my dad out of school when he was about 6th grade or so in order to start working for the family. My dad was the youngest of 9 brothers and sisters, and he was the least important. So they took him out of school and made him work for the home, and he kind of just got sacrificed. You know, his education got sacrificed for the rest of his brothers and sisters. That's kind of how things were back then. And I remember him telling me the story of they were on the garbage route one day, and they came out of that garbage route with this. They pulled this out of the garbage pile, and this is a Acme, what did I say it was? 1896. I think made by, what did you say, the Davenport Firearms Company? Now, he got this obviously used, is kind of an understatement. It was in disrepair, and somebody had thrown it into the garbage dump, and they took it out, and they did the best they could to repair it, and they put some screws in it here, and you can see that there's still a good bit of electrical tape on this. At one point, my dad had mounted a red dot to this, which is pretty funny. His eyes were fading, and he mounted a dot to this because his dad hunted with this, and he wanted to hunt with this. But I gotta tell you, if you're interested in recoil, this is a good way to go. When I first shot this when I was a kid, it didn't have this recoil pad. It had a steel butt pad on it, and this is a single-barreled 12 gauge. And as a young kid, firing a 12 gauge slug out of a single barrel with no recoil mechanism whatsoever in a gun that's just rickety as shit. I mean, the thing shook every time you shot it, like it was gonna fall apart. It was like it would explode in your face. I remember thinking this is the scariest gun when I was a kid. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to shoot this, I don't have to shoot this. And Dad always would make us shoot a couple because I'm sure it was funny. But yeah, this thing right here means arguably more to me than almost any gun in my collection, just because it really is like an heirloom in our family. And I'm gonna get this fixed up and give this to my brother. I think he probably deserves it a little more than I do, and he doesn't shoot much, so he can shoot this monster. This is the semi-automatic 22 we had when I was a kid, and it's not a Ruger 1022. It is actually a Winchester Model 74. I think these originated around the 30s or so. And I know this particular one here, well, not this particular one, but this model actually saw some service in the war as a training rifle, I believe, with the British. This thing's been around for quite a while, and we didn't shoot this as much as we shot the lever action, although we had them both, and that's simply because this one was very unreliable. Throughout my whole life, this has been pretty unreliable, and it's got some pretty interesting ergonomics that I wanted to show you guys. So, as you can see here, there's no magazine to it, and there's no tube under the bottom. The magazine is actually in the back here, and I believe we turn it like this. It's been a while. You pull the tube out, and then you just feed it in there like you'd feed the Henry, and then when you get done there, you just slam that back in there, and lock it back up, and you're ready to go. And I think it holds 10 or 12 rounds or something like that. And in theory, it would fire semi-automatically, but in practice, not so much. It's kind of cool because when the charging handle, I would always take down and kind of thumb like that. I remember doing that, and then the safety is up there. It's actually more of like a cross bolt safety, but it's on the top of the receiver here, which is really interesting. It's got good ergonomics as far as feel, though the stock is super comfortable. It's got a walnut stock to it, and I think it has something like a 22-inch barrel, which gives a good velocity for that 22. Also, it's got a similar set of buckhorn sights, even though it totally doesn't need them. I think those were just really popular in the time that these guns were released. I remember the nub of this being really comfortable, because I would always hold it like this and shoot it like this when I was shooting when I was younger. But yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of this thing as long as it worked. We used to train my nephews, and I would always bring out the lever action and the semi-auto, and they would always go toward the semi-auto first, but within about 20 minutes or so, they'd be shooting the lever action just simply because of the reliability problems. But it's still a cool gun regardless, and it was certainly the first semi-automatic rifle I ever shot, so figured I'd show that. This was my grandpa's, actually. Now, if you're ever wondering if my dad got out of that boxcar, he definitely did. My dad would go on to not only get out of there, but he would move to California, where I was actually born. And he would go all over the West. My dad was a huge hunter. He would spend all the time he possibly could hunting. And he liked to hunt out west a lot. He was a big fan of hunting deer and elk out west. And he did a lot of that with this guy right here. He was a big fan of lever actions, as I said. My dad could ride horses, and he used to own horses, and he used to do all kinds of crazy stuff. He used to love Western movies, and I'm sure that influenced his choice. This is a Glenfield Model 30. Now this is sort of a copy, I believe, like a licensed copy of the Marlin. And Marlin and Glenfield have a close relationship, but this is a 30-30. And this certainly is one of the most popular rifles I shot with when I was a kid. We didn't have a lot of high-powered rifles at the house, mostly shotguns and stuff. So 30-30 was kind of our long-range weapon, believe it or not. And in Iowa, shots can be pretty far. So I got used to shooting 200-ish rounds with the 200 yards with this. No problem. I remember when I was a kid, we had a 4-power fixed scope on this, and now there's peep sights on it with a fiber optic front. We did that later in my dad's life before he passed, because he had a hard time seeing the sights and seeing the scope, like a lot of older people. And sometimes fiber optic helps with that. Red dot really does help with that, which is one of the reasons why the previous shotgun had a dot mount on it. He loved this gun so much. I remember he used to tell all these stories about shooting antelope and all kinds of stuff on the run with these. And he went and hunted in Wyoming a lot with this. And this has, I think, 6+1 of 30-30. And you got to understand, a lot of these guns are in poor condition. It's not my fault. This is just how they are. These are work guns. Like, none of these hung on a mantelpiece or anything like that. They were all used for hunting, or they were used for home defense, or they got pawned. You know, that's how I grew up. There wasn't anything cool to look at. Either got used or it didn't, you know. And this thing was all beat up all the time. People buy these like super fancy leather straps to help with the lever, and my dad just put electrical tape all over it, because I guess that works. We got our leather sling here, and we have a shell mount that I put on there. That's actually for me later in life, because this is a gun I took to Colorado with my wife and I on vacation, because I just think a 30-30 is a good all-around home defense slash hunting gun if you needed to. Bear defense gun, whatever you need it to. These guns are legal in almost every state, and they're super powerful, and they're repeat shots, so you know, I'm pretty good with them myself. So I still use this gun today for pretty much a lot of things my dad used it for. But yeah, he went out west, and he started a tree company, and it was very profitable. And then my mom convinced him to move back to Iowa, so here we are. But he took this gun with him from there. I think he got it out there. But yeah, I always think of my dad when I look at this guy. It's got some really cool engraving on it for being kind of a clone rifle. Most people kind of sneer at these, but in my experience, you know, this is a 2-3 MOA gun, if I remember correctly, and that'll get the job done any day of the week and twice on Sunday. About the time we moved back to Iowa, I started working for the tree service myself. I was a ground guy for my dad's tree service for many years. It's a good way to make money during the summer, and a good way to get tough too if you've ever tried it. Dragging limbs and feeding a chipper when you're 12 years old make a man out of you. But I also started hunting around then, and I figured I'd get my own gun instead of using his. So this is the first gun my dad purchased for me for hunting. This is an H&R 20 gauge single shot, and I've shot, I think 3 or 4 deer with this, with rifled slugs. It's got a smooth barrel. I think it's a 22-inch barrel, 1 shot, and it has no safety, I don't believe. Nope. It just has open, closed, cocked, or uncocked. It's pretty simple. I used to carry 5 extra rounds on the back of the stock, and I got real good at sliding them in fast. Because if you miss, you don't have much time, and if you got to break your gun down or reload and reacquire a sight picture, you got to get good at it. So we did, and I shot a deer at 80 yards with this. I shot a deer cross the pond with this the first time I ever shot. They're good, man. I mean, people say you can't aim with a bead sight, but you can. I mean, you just center the bead. You just pretend there's a rear sight. You know what I mean? You just line it up, center it with the back of the barrel, and go to work. I mean, I practiced when I was a kid shooting paper plates with this. You just set up a paper plate at 50 yards, and you just practice your breath control, practice your trigger control, and you'd be surprised what you're capable of, even with the simplest firearm. And the nice part about these is not only are they extremely cheap, you know, $100, $200, they're super durable. They require almost no cleaning to function well because there's no real moving parts. And on top of that, they actually make conversion kits for these, so you can put 9mm in them or 22 in them or whatever you want. They're just a barrel sleeve conversion you can slide in there, and then you can shoot a whole bunch of different calibers out of this 20 gauge barrel. So it gives you a lot of diversity and a lot of ability with a very cheap, simplistic gun, and that's why you're going to see a few of these. You know, you saw 1 single action or 1 single barreled shotgun. It's because they're shockingly useful, and when you're on the farm, when you're a kid or whatever, you can't afford a case of ammo. You know, 1, 2, 3 shots is all you get. You better hit. So if you can only afford to shoot 1 shot, you might as well only have a single shot anyway, I suppose. Now this is my first upgrade here. This was my dad's. I went from the gun he bought me back to another one of his guns because I felt like I needed a semi-auto because Ricky Bobby likes to go fast. I've always liked to go fast. So I wanted a few more shots, and this is what I ended up with. This is actually a Remington Sportsman 48. And this is a semi-automatic 16 gauge. I'm not saying that wrong. It's a 16 gauge. It's in between 12 and 20 for you young kids out there who are unfamiliar. 16 gauge used to be more popular than 20 gauge and about as popular as 12 gauge, although it waned in recent years, and now it's so hard to find ammunition for it, you might just be able to find buck or maybe birdshot. But we used to shoot slugs through this all day. We used to get from the local store. And I've shot a lot of deer with this as well. Not only does it have just a bead sight, but this one's got a little bit of a ramp here that you can kind of aim with, and it's got a little bit longer barrel, so that's nice. And on top of that, it had, you know, 3 extra rounds or 2 extra rounds if you missed. That's kind of cool. This is the predecessor, I believe, to the 1100, and it actually uses a pretty unique spring system. If you slide this off here, this handguard, there's actually a spring in there, and it runs completely differently than most modern shotguns do today. I'm not super expert on it. I'm trying to remember what it looked like from cleaning it like 25 years ago. I haven't been in this gun in a long time, but this man was certainly one of my favorites. Just this year alone, my nephew Ryan hunted with this. And my buddy borrowed this last year, so this thing still gets work in. This thing's still shooting deer. Still a good gun for what it is. Good cone length, good stock, and good classic ergonomics. It feels just like an 1100. If you're familiar with the Remingtons, it looks like an 1100 because it's the 1100's grandpa. All right, now is what I consider maybe the star of the show. So I mentioned in the previous video that my grandpa came back with a shotgun from World War II. And we're not super sure on the details of that. We're not entirely sure where he got this. My grandpa's been passed away since the 90s. But I do know we've never shot this gun, and I do think I know what this is. So it just says Winchester on the side, and it has a lot of dates starting at 1902. But it's got some interesting features on it that make it, I think, pretty easy to identify. This is actually a Winchester model 1911. And what makes this so fascinating is because when these were originally produced, they actually couldn't use the Browning A5 action, which was the only semi-automatic shotgun action at the time in existence in the world, I believe. So they went with something that they did have a patent on, which is this wild shit. So in order to cock this shotgun, you can see there's no charging handle here at all. And there's no mechanism whatsoever to charge the gun. What you charge it with is the barrel. So we take it up here, we put it here, we grab the knurling on the barrel, and we slam it down, and we cock the shotgun. Did you hear it slam in? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good time, right? And that's why we never actually shot the gun, because the gun seems to like to go off about every half time we cock it. They used to call this gun the Widowmaker, and the reason for that is because back in the day when they used like paper shells and such, they would have a lot of malfunctions and a lot of issues with feeding the gun, and then you'd have people that would put this gun on the ground and they would cock it just like I showed you. But the problem is the barrel's pointed at your face. So when it goes off, you no longer have a face. This gun was certainly a very dangerous firearm in its day, not just to other people, but to the users as well. I always thought that cocking with the barrel action was very cool. I thought the fact that my grandpa had a semi-automatic, essentially combat shotgun when I was younger was very cool. This is one of the guns that he had talked about using many times, but I never saw him hunt with it. It's interesting. It's a cool gun. It looks like a Browning A5, just like that Glenfield model. I think the copies of popular guns were popular throughout all of history. But this is one of my favorites, and this thing doesn't get any range time for obvious reasons, but I thought it would be interesting to show you guys. And I wanted to ask you guys a question. What the hell would this gun be doing in Europe in the 1940s? But let me know in the comment section below what you think. Let me know how my grandpa maybe actually got a hold of this, and what you think of this weird unicorn gun overall. And then we'll talk about one more gun that has an interesting story in my family before I get out of your hair. Now, one more gun, and this will be a little underwhelming, but it comes with a story, so I figured it'd be fun for last. My dad and I, we used to do trees on contract, and what that means is we used to be electrical arborists. We used to own a company that we used to clear power lines 10 feet away, 10 foot above, 10 foot below, and we usually worked around 240,000 volts, so we had some fun. One of the most dangerous jobs in the country, but it was a lot of fun. But the interesting part is it kept us on the road for a long, long time. And because of that, people like my wife, for example, or my mom, especially when I was younger, you have to be a little self-reliant. And you have to have a gun in the house, especially when you live in a rural area. My mom had somebody break in, and what did my mom grab? A lever action shotgun. This is actually a Chinese copy of an 1887 lever action shotgun. Now, I heard the other day somebody tell me in my comment section that lever action shotguns didn't exist, and I was like, A, watch Terminator 2, B, watch this. So I actually have a lever action 12 gauge here, and it's kind of fun, but it's also quite the novelty. I laugh because out of all the guns in my collection to use for home defense, this one would be among the least. Not only is this a cheap Chinese copy, this is one of the first guns I can afford to buy my dad. I actually bought this for his birthday. I think when I was really young, maybe 18, so maybe around 20 years ago or something like that. I can't remember. But we found out pretty quick that not only is this bad boy completely filled with Cosmoline, but the action on this is unbelievably terrible. And we actually had a lot of problems with the feeding and reliability of this shotgun. That being said, it's still pretty cool, because not only are these in like Call of Duty, and this is kind of the basis for the gun that's in Terminator 2, but my mom fended off a burglar with this while it was not even loaded. So I thought that would be a funny story to tell. If you want to hear more about my life and my youth and stuff like that, leave it in the comment section below. If you want to see more of these, there are more. I just wanted to bring up some that meant a lot to me. Leave that in the comment section below either. Sorry for giving you a video that's not quite as exciting as previous videos, not a lot of shooting and banging and hitting the steel and all that. Let me know if you like this video. It's kind of a change of pace. It's kind of a different look at things. I don't talk about myself too much because I don't feel like I don't want to get in the way of like details of gun reviews and stuff, but you guys seem interested, so hopefully you enjoy this video. Looking at my past, kind of a little nerve-wracking for me to tell you guys all about my family, but hopefully you enjoy it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please help our local homeless shelters, and remember to recycle, and Merry Christmas.